3 months ago, I walked away from everything I built, a $5.2 million business empire torn from my hands by my own mother and handed to my golden child sister like a birthday present. Today, they are both sitting in my living room, tears streaming down their faces, begging me to save them from the catastrophic mess they created. But here is the thing about family betrayal. Once you see their true colors, you can never unsee them. Before we dive into this family revenge story that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about blood loyalty, I need to know, where are you watching from right now? If you are ready for a tale of justice served cold and karma coming full circle, smash that like button and hit subscribe because this story has more twists than a pretzel factory. And trust me, you will want to see how this family drama unfolds until the very last shocking moment. My name is Seraphina, and 6 years ago I started Moonstone Analytics from my garage with nothing but a laptop, $2,000 in savings, and a revolutionary algorithm I developed for predictive marketing. While my sister Bethany was busy posting Instagram photos from her third European vacation that year, funded entirely by our parents, I was working 18-hour days living on ramen noodles and determination. The irony was not lost on me that while Mom constantly criticized my obsession with work and suggested I should be more like Bethany, focused on family and relationships, she had no problem accepting the monthly checks I sent to help with Dad's medical bills after his stroke. $20,000 a month for 3 years, money that came directly from the profits of the company she claimed was just a hobby that got out of hand. Moonstone Analytics grew from a one-woman operation to a team of 47 employees. We secured contracts with Fortune 500 companies, developed proprietary software that revolutionized customer behavior prediction, and built a client base that stretched across 3 continents. I poured my soul into that company, missing family dinners, skipping vacations, and sacrificing relationships because I believed I was building something that would secure our family's future. The first red flag appeared 8 months ago during our annual family Thanksgiving dinner. Mom pulled me aside after dessert, her voice carrying that particular tone she used when she was about to deliver life advice I never asked for. "Seraphina, honey, you know how much your father and I appreciate everything you have done for this family," she began, and I should have known right then that a massive but was coming. "But we have been talking, and we are worried about you. You are 32 years old, unmarried, no children, completely consumed by work. Look at Bethany. She has found balance." Balance. That was Mom's code word for Bethany's lifestyle of casual employment, constant travel, and complete financial dependence on our parents. Bethany, who was 29 and had never held a job for longer than 8 months. Bethany, who still lived in our childhood bedroom and treated our parents' house like a luxury hotel with maid service. "We think," Mom continued, "that it might be time for you to step back and let someone else handle the day-to-day operations of your company, someone who can bring fresh perspective and maybe help you find some work-life balance." The conversation escalated over the following months. Mom became increasingly insistent that I was burning out and needed to delegate more responsibility. She suggested Bethany could help with the business side of things, despite the fact that my sister's most impressive professional achievement was once selling $1,500 worth of essential oils to her yoga class before the pyramid scheme collapsed. Then came the family meeting that changed everything. March 15th, a date now burned into my memory like a brand. Mom had requested that I come to dinner to discuss the future of our family's financial security. I arrived expecting to talk about Dad's long-term care needs, or maybe finally setting up that trust fund I had been suggesting for years. Instead, I walked into an ambush. Bethany was sitting at the dining room table with a stack of legal documents in front of her, wearing what I now recognize as her fake, guilty expression. the same one she used to wear when Mom caught her stealing money from my piggy bank as kids. Mom had her "this hurts me more than it hurts you" face on the one that preceded every major childhood punishment. "Seraphina, please sit down," Mom said, gesturing to the chair across from Bethany like I was about to receive a terminal diagnosis. "Your father and I have made a decision about Moonstone Analytics." The words that followed hit me like physical blows. Mom explained that she and Dad had been consulting with financial advisors and had determined that the stress of running the company was destroying my health and happiness. They had decided that the best solution was to transfer ownership of Moonstone Analytics to Bethany, who would serve as CEO while I transitioned to a consulting role. "It is for your own good, sweetheart," Mom insisted as I stared at the transfer documents in shock. "Bethany has been taking business courses online, and she has some really innovative ideas about how to expand the company's social media presence." The legal papers were already prepared. The transfer was structured as a family gift to avoid excessive taxes, and my parents had used their influence as co-signers on my original business loan, a detail I had forgotten about from the early days when I needed their credit history to secure funding, to make the change legally binding. But the real betrayal came when I discovered the truth behind their financial advisors. Through a mutual friend who worked at the law firm that prepared the documents, I learned that Bethany had been meeting with these lawyers for 6 months, planning this takeover, while I was working 90-hour weeks to land our biggest client contract ever. The lawyers had advised my family that because my parents were technically co-signers on the original business loan and had contributed to the initial funding, the $20,000 gift they gave me in year 2, which I later learned they expected to be treated as an investment rather than family support, they had legal grounds to claim partial ownership of the company. More devastating was the discovery that Bethany had already been in talks with 3 of our major clients, positioning herself as the new leadership and promising more personalized service and competitive pricing. She had been systematically undermining my relationships with key accounts, while I trusted her enough to give her access to client information during family dinners. The final insult was learning that Mom had been telling extended family members and family friends that I was having a breakdown, and that they were intervening to save both me and the business. She had painted herself and Bethany as heroes rescuing me from my own success. Standing in that dining room looking at the legal documents that would strip away 6 years of my life's work, I realized that the people I had sacrificed everything to support had been planning to steal my company while I was sending them monthly checks and working myself to exhaustion to provide for their comfort. That night, I signed the papers. Not because I accepted their reasoning, but because I knew something they did not. I had been preparing for this possibility longer than they had been planning their betrayal. The morning after signing those papers, I walked into Moonstone Analytics for what everyone believed would be my last day as CEO. Bethany had already moved into my office, rearranging furniture and hanging motivational posters about teamwork and synergy. She wore a new business suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, purchased with money from the company account she now controlled. What my family did not know was that for the past 18 months, I had been quietly building a parallel structure. Every major client contract included clauses that tied services specifically to my personal expertise and proprietary algorithms. The core software that powered our predictive analytics was registered under my individual copyright, separate from the company's general intellectual property. Most importantly, I had been developing a new platform called Phoenix Insights, registered under a completely different business entity that my family knew nothing about. The first phase of my plan activated automatically the moment ownership transferred to Bethany. Every major client received notification that their contracts contained key personnel clauses that required my direct involvement in service delivery. Without me, those contracts became null and void with 60 days' notice required for termination. Bethany discovered this during her first week as CEO when Marcus Hartwell from our biggest client, Synergy Corp, called demanding to speak with me directly about their quarterly analytics report. When she confidently assured him that she could handle any questions, Marcus politely explained that their contract specifically required my personal oversight and that they would be terminating their relationship with Moonstone Analytics effective immediately unless I remained in full control of their account. "But I am the CEO now," Bethany protested, and I could hear the panic creeping into her voice from my temporary desk in the corner office they had relegated me to. "I can handle anything Seraphina was doing." Marcus, bless his corporate heart, delivered the news with brutal efficiency. "Ms. Bethany, your sister spent 2 years developing a customized algorithm that increased our customer retention by 43%. Our contract explicitly states that any changes in key personnel require renegotiation of terms and pricing. We signed with Moonstone Analytics specifically for Seraphina's expertise, not the company's general services. By the end of week 2, 6 of our 8 major clients had submitted termination notices. The remaining 2 were month-to-month contracts that generated barely enough revenue to cover office rent, let alone employee salaries. But the real revelation came when I started auditing the financial records under my new consulting role. What I discovered made the initial betrayal look like a minor family squabble. For the past 8 months, while Mom was pressuring me to delegate more responsibility, Bethany had been systematically siphoning money from company accounts. Small amounts at first, a few thousand here and there, categorized as marketing expenses or research and development. But as she grew more confident, the theft escalated. The paper trail was almost laughably obvious once I knew what to look for. Bethany had been using company credit cards for personal expenses, luxury spa treatments, designer clothing, expensive dinners with friends, and even a down payment on a BMW. She claimed was for client meetings. Over 8 months, she had embezzled nearly $180,000. More disturbing was the discovery that Mom had known about the theft. I found email exchanges between them discussing how to restructure company finances to better support family needs. In one particularly damning message, Mom wrote, "Seraphina makes more money than she knows what to do with anyway. She is so focused on work that she will never notice these small adjustments." The smoking gun was a document I found in Bethany's desk drawer, a detailed plan titled Transitioning Moonstone Analytics to Family Management. The plan outlined a 3-phase strategy. Phase 1 involved gaining access to financial records and client information. Phase 2 was the ownership transfer I had just experienced. Phase 3 was the complete liquidation of company assets, with proceeds to be distributed to family members as return on investment. They had never intended to run Moonstone Analytics. They planned to strip it for parts, sell the client contracts and intellectual property to competitors, and divide the money among themselves. In their minds, I had been building their retirement fund for 6 years. Armed with this evidence, I scheduled a meeting with our family lawyer, Richard Pemberton, who had been handling our family's legal matters for over 20 years. Richard was old school, the kind of lawyer who believed in handshake deals and family loyalty, which made his reaction to my evidence all the more powerful. "Seraphina," he said after reviewing the financial records and email exchanges, "this is not a family dispute about business management. This is embezzlement fraud and conspiracy to commit theft. The amounts involved cross felony thresholds in this state." Richard explained that Bethany's theft constituted multiple felonies, each carrying potential prison sentences of 3 to 7 years. The conspiracy between Mom and Bethany to defraud me of my business added additional charges. Most importantly, the ownership transfer itself could be challenged in court as the product of fraudulent misrepresentation since they had gained access to company information through theft rather than legitimate business evaluation. But here is the thing that really bothers me. Richard continued, leaning back in his leather chair with the expression of someone who had seen too much family ugliness over 4 decades of practice. They did not just steal from you, Seraphina. They stole from your employees, your clients, and everyone who depended on that company's success. This was not a family member asking for help. This was a calculated plan to destroy everything you built. The next morning, I called a company-wide meeting. Standing in the conference room where I had announced our biggest client victories and celebrated our team's achievements, I laid out the evidence of theft and fraud. I showed the employees the emails between Mom and Bethany, the falsified expense reports, and the secret plan to liquidate their jobs along with everything else. Then, I made an announcement that sent shockwaves through my family. Effective immediately, I am filing criminal charges against Bethany for embezzlement and fraud. I am also challenging the ownership transfer in court on grounds of fraudulent misrepresentation and conspiracy to commit theft. But the real bombshell was my final statement. Additionally, I am formally launching Phoenix Insights, which will be offering employment to every current Moonstone Analytics team member along with our client base effective immediately. Anyone who wants to continue working in an environment based on merit rather than family politics is welcome to join me. Within 72 hours, 45 of our 47 employees had submitted resignations from Moonstone Analytics and signed contracts with Phoenix Insights. Our entire client base followed invoking the key personnel clauses that tied their contracts to my direct involvement. Bethany went from CEO of a $5.2 million company to managing an empty office building with 2 part-time administrative assistants and a pile of legal bills. The war had officially begun. The phone calls started 3 days after I filed the criminal charges. Dad first, his voice shaky and confused, asking why I was tearing the family apart over business disagreements. Then Mom alternating between fury and manipulation, insisting that I was destroying your sister's life over money and that family should always come first. But the call that truly revealed their desperation came from Bethany herself, sobbing into the phone at 2 a.m, begging me to just talk this through like sisters and promising she could pay everything back if I would just drop the charges. "Sarah, please," she cried, using the childhood nickname she had not called me in 15 years. "I made mistakes, but I never meant to hurt you. I just thought, Mom said you would not even notice the money was gone because you make so much. I thought we were all building this together as a family." And the performance was Academy Award worthy, complete with choking sobs and promises to get help and be better. But I had learned too much about calculated manipulation to fall for tears and childhood nicknames. "Bethany," I said calmly, "you stole $180,000 from my company while planning to liquidate it for parts. You conspired with Mom to steal 6 years of my life's work. The time for sisterly heart-to-hearts ended when you decided to commit multiple felonies." What they did not know was that their phone calls were actually helping me build my case. Richard Pemberton had advised me to keep detailed records of all contact attempts, especially any admissions of guilt or attempts to influence my decision to pursue criminal charges. Bethany's tearful confession that she made mistakes and her offer to pay everything back were legal admissions that strengthened the prosecution's case. But my real advantage came from an unexpected source, the employees who had followed me to Phoenix Insights. As it turned out, several of them had witnessed or suspected Bethany's theft long before I discovered it, but had been afraid to speak up against the boss's sister. Marcus Rodriguez, our former head of client services, approached me during our first week at the new office. Seraphina, I need to tell you something about Bethany that I should have reported months ago. He explained that he had seen her using company credit cards for personal purchases and had even confronted her about it once, only to be told that she had family approval for the expenses. She said your mom had authorized her to handle some family financial matters through the company and that it was temporary. Marcus continued. I knew it felt wrong, but I did not want to cause family drama or risk my job by questioning family decisions. Sarah Kim, our former lead developer, had an even more damaging story. Bethany asked me to help her access client databases about 4 months ago. She said she wanted to understand our customer base better and needed detailed contact information and contract terms. I gave her read-only access, but she somehow figured out how to download entire client files. Most devastating was the testimony from Jennifer Walsh, who had been Bethany's assistant during her brief time at the company. Jennifer revealed that Bethany had been in regular contact with our competitors, specifically Apex Analytics and Meridian Strategies, discussing potential sale of our client contracts and proprietary algorithms. She made me schedule calls with their business development teams, Jennifer explained. She told me it was for market research, but I heard parts of the conversations. She was definitely negotiating sale prices for your client relationships and asking about acquisition offers for the company's intellectual property. With each revelation, I realized that the betrayal went far deeper than simple embezzlement. Bethany had been systematically preparing to sell off every valuable asset of Moonstone Analytics while positioning herself as the legitimate owner who could authorize those sales. Richard Pemberton was fascinated by the scope of the conspiracy. Seraphina, this is not opportunistic theft by a family member who got in over her head. This was a sophisticated plan to commit what essentially amounts to identity theft on a corporate level. She was going to steal your business identity and sell it to your competitors. But my strongest ally emerged from the most unexpected place, our former landlord, David Chin, who owned the building where Moonstone Analytics had been headquartered. David had been struggling with the decision to renew Bethany's lease after several late rent payments, and when he learned about the charges against her, he called me with information that sealed her fate. Seraphina. I probably should have told you this months ago, but Bethany approached me about breaking your lease and subletting the space to Apex Analytics, David revealed. She said the company was planning to relocate and wanted to help me find replacement tenants. She even brought representatives from Apex to tour the building, including your office space and server rooms. David's security cameras had captured Bethany giving Apex executives detailed tours of our facilities, including areas where our proprietary servers and development workstations were located. The timestamps on the recordings showed these tours happening 3 weeks before the ownership transfer, proving that she was already negotiating with our competitors while still pretending to be a supportive family member. The evidence was becoming overwhelming. But the real breakthrough came when Richard discovered that Bethany had actually opened preliminary negotiations with Meridian Strategies to sell them our predictive analytics algorithm for $2.8 million. She had been planning to complete this sale within 6 months of taking control of the company. She was not stealing your business to run it, Richard explained. She was stealing it to liquidate it and disappear with the money. Your parents either knew about this plan or were willfully ignorant because it benefited them financially. Armed with this mountain of evidence, I made a decision that would change the trajectory of the entire case. I reached out to FBI agent Victoria Santos, who specialized in corporate fraud and cybercrime. Agent Santos had worked on several high-profile cases involving theft of intellectual property and had a reputation for thorough investigations. Agent Santos took one look at our evidence and immediately opened a federal investigation. Ms. Seraphina, what we are looking at here crosses state lines and involves potential sale of proprietary technology to competing firms. This moves beyond simple embezzlement into federal territory. The federal investigation expanded the scope of consequences exponentially. Instead of facing state-level theft charges that might result in probation or short-term imprisonment, Bethany was now looking at federal fraud charges that carried mandatory minimum sentences and substantial fines. But Agent Santos also delivered news that complicated my emotional relationship with the case. Our preliminary investigation suggests that your parents may have been victims of manipulation rather than willing conspirators. Your sister appears to have convinced them that she was protecting both you and the business from some kind of external threat. This revelation forced me to confront the possibility that Mom and Dad had been played just as skillfully as everyone else. Bethany had apparently convinced them that I was struggling with stress and making poor business decisions, and that competitors were circling like vultures, waiting to steal the company from our family entirely. According to Agent Santos, Bethany had shown Mom and Dad falsified emails supposedly from Apex Analytics, claiming they were planning a hostile acquisition of Moonstone Analytics that would leave our family with nothing. She positioned her takeover plan as the only way to keep the business in family hands and protect everyone's financial future. Your sister is either a criminal mastermind or someone with serious psychological issues around manipulation and control, Agent Santos concluded. Either way, the evidence shows a pattern of calculated deception that extends far beyond simple sibling rivalry or family greed. As the federal investigation gained momentum, I found myself in the strange position of having to decide whether I wanted justice or revenge. The evidence was clear, the case was airtight, and Bethany was almost certainly going to prison. But learning about her manipulation of our parents added a layer of complexity I had not expected. The alliance I had built, Richard, Agent Santos, my loyal employees, and even David Chen, had given me more power than I had ever wielded as a simple business owner. Now I had to decide how to use that power and whether my ultimate goal was punishment or protection. That decision would be tested sooner than I expected. The betrayal came from the person I trusted most, Richard Pemberton, our family lawyer for over 20 years. The man who had helped me build the case against Bethany, who had expressed moral outrage at her theft, who had connected me with FBI agent Santos. He had been playing both sides from the very beginning. I discovered his treachery by accident during a routine meeting at his office. While waiting for Richard to finish a phone call, I noticed a familiar name on an open file folder on his desk. Bethany Morrison, Defense Strategy. My heart stopped as I recognized my sister's handwriting on legal documents that outlined a complete counter-narrative to everything we had built over the past month. When Richard returned to his office, I confronted him directly. Explain to me why you have defense strategy documents for my sister when you are supposed to be representing me in this case. Richard's face went through a series of expressions. Surprise, calculation, and finally resignation. He sank into his leather chair like a man who had been caught in an elaborate lie and was too tired to maintain the performance any longer. Seraphina, you have to understand that I have been your family's lawyer for decades. Your parents came to me in desperation, begging me to find a way to protect Bethany from prison time. They are convinced she was manipulated by some outside influence and that she never intended real harm. The scope of his betrayal was breathtaking. Richard had been feeding information about our case strategy to Bethany's defense team while simultaneously helping me gather evidence against her. He had recommended specific approaches that would actually weaken the prosecution's case and had delayed filing certain documents that would have strengthened federal charges. But more than that, Richard continued, your parents have made it clear that they expect me to prioritize family preservation over legal justice. They have threatened to take their considerable legal business elsewhere if I do not find a way to minimize Bethany's exposure. Richard revealed that Mom and Dad had been funding Bethany's defense through a high-powered criminal attorney named Harrison Webb, who specialized in white-collar crime defense. Webb had been developing a strategy that painted Bethany as a victim of mental health issues and family pressure while positioning me as a vindictive sister who was using the legal system for personal revenge. Webb plans to argue that Bethany was suffering from depression and anxiety that impaired her judgment and that your parents' pressure to help with the family business created a situation where she felt compelled to take actions she did not fully understand, Richard explained. The defense strategy was sophisticated and potentially effective. They planned to present evidence of Bethany's mental health struggles character witnesses who would testify about her good intentions and expert testimony about how family dysfunction could lead to poor decision-making without criminal intent. But the most devastating part of Richard's revelation was that he had been sabotaging my case from the inside. I delayed filing the federal paperwork for 2 weeks to give Webb time to negotiate a plea deal that would avoid federal charges entirely. I also advised you against pursuing certain evidence that would have been most damaging to Bethany's case. See, I felt the familiar sensation of betrayal washing over me, but this time it was accompanied by cold rage rather than shock. Richard, you took an oath to represent your client's interests. I am your client in this case. Seraphina, your entire family is my client and has been for 20 years. I am trying to find a solution that protects everyone's interests, not just your desire for revenge. That word, revenge, crystallized something for me. Richard, like Mom and Dad, saw my pursuit of justice as personal vendetta rather than legitimate response to serious crimes. They could not conceive that someone might seek accountability for its own sake rather than out of spite. I left Richard's office that day knowing I was truly alone in this fight. The lawyer who was supposed to represent me was actively working against me. My parents had chosen to protect Bethany despite overwhelming evidence of her crimes. The family I had supported financially and emotionally for years had united against me in defense of the person who had stolen my life's work. But Richard had made a crucial mistake in his confession. He had revealed details about Webb's defense strategy that I could use to anticipate and counter their arguments. He had also inadvertently confirmed that Bethany was indeed guilty of everything we had suspected, since an innocent person would not need such an elaborate defense strategy. That evening, I called Agent Santos and explained Richard's betrayal. Her response was immediate and decisive. Ms. Morrison, this actually strengthens our case significantly. A lawyer's conflict of interest and attempts to manipulate evidence on behalf of a criminal defendant can constitute obstruction of justice. We may have grounds to investigate Mr. Pemberton as well. Agent Santos explained that Richard's actions had potentially compromised his legal standing and could result in disbarment proceedings. More importantly, his admission that he had delayed filing federal documents and withheld evidence provided additional proof of the conspiracy surrounding Bethany's crimes. But here is what I need you to understand, Agent Santos continued. Your family's attempt to manipulate the legal system actually demonstrates consciousness of guilt. Innocent people do not need elaborate cover-ups and defense strategies. They certainly do not try to bribe their lawyer into sabotaging the prosecution's case. The revelation about Richard's betrayal had an unexpected side effect. It freed me from any remaining emotional attachment to seeking my family's approval or understanding. They had made their choice to protect a criminal at the expense of justice, and they had chosen to sacrifice my well-being to preserve their preferred family narrative. Within 48 hours of discovering Richard's treachery, I had hired a new attorney, Miranda Torres, a former federal prosecutor who specialized in corporate fraud cases and had no prior relationship with my family. Miranda's first action was to file a complaint against Richard with the State Bar Association and to demand that all case materials be transferred immediately to avoid further obstruction. Miranda also advised me to cease all contact with my family members to prevent any additional attempts at manipulation or evidence tampering. Seraphina, your family has demonstrated that they will use emotional manipulation and legal sabotage to protect your sister from consequences. Any continued contact gives them opportunities to further interfere with the investigation. The isolation was complete but clarifying. I had built a business empire through my own efforts, survived my family's betrayal and theft, and now I was navigating their attempts to destroy me legally and emotionally. Each betrayal had stripped away another layer of illusion about family loyalty and unconditional love, but it had also revealed something important about my own strength and resilience. I had survived the initial theft of my company and had successfully launched Phoenix Insights. I had gathered evidence of multiple felonies and had attracted federal law enforcement attention. I had built a new team of loyal employees and allies who believed in accountability and justice. Richard's betrayal was the final test of whether I would choose family approval or personal integrity. Standing in my new office at Phoenix Insights, surrounded by people who had chosen merit over politics and honesty over manipulation, I realized that I had already made that choice weeks ago. The question now was not whether I would win this legal battle. The evidence was too overwhelming for Bethany to avoid serious consequences. The question was whether I would emerge from this experience stronger and wiser, or whether my family's betrayal would leave permanent damage to my ability to trust and connect with others. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source, Harrison Webb himself, the high-powered defense attorney my parents had hired to protect Bethany. Webb's arrogance and overconfidence led him to make a critical error that would ultimately seal my sister's fate and expose the full scope of the conspiracy against me. Webb had requested a meeting with Miranda Torres, my new attorney, claiming he wanted to discuss settlement options that would be beneficial to all parties involved. Miranda agreed to the meeting but insisted on recording the entire conversation, a standard practice in criminal defense negotiations. What Webb revealed during that meeting went far beyond anything we had previously uncovered. Apparently believing that Miranda would be impressed by his client's cooperation and his own legal sophistication, Webb laid out Bethany's entire defense strategy while inadvertently providing evidence of additional crimes. My client acknowledges that certain financial irregularities occurred during her brief tenure with Moonstone Analytics. Webb began using the kind of euphemistic language that makes theft sound like accounting errors. However, we have evidence that these actions were taken under duress and with the explicit encouragement of family members who had legitimate authority over company operations. Webb then produced a series of documents that he claimed supported Bethany's defense, but actually proved the opposite. Text messages between Bethany and Mom showed detailed planning of the embezzlement scheme, including specific instructions on how to categorize personal expenses as business costs and which company credit cards would be least likely to trigger audit flags. "Look at this message from March 8th, Webb said confidently, apparently believing the text supported his client's innocence. Bethany writes to her mother, "I moved $15,000 to the marketing account like you suggested. The BMW payment went through as consulting fees just like we discussed. This has to be the last time, though. Sarah is getting suspicious about the expense reports." Miranda maintained her poker face during the meeting, but I could see her taking detailed notes as Webb essentially handed us evidence of premeditated conspiracy. Each document he shared to prove Bethany's victimization actually demonstrated calculated planning and awareness of wrongdoing. The most damaging revelation was Webb's disclosure that Mom had been involved in planning the ownership transfer for over a year, not just the 6 months we had previously discovered. Webb showed us email exchanges dating back 14 months where Mom discussed the need to protect family assets from Seraphina's poor business decisions, and the importance of ensuring family wealth stays in responsible hands. In one particularly revealing email, Mom wrote to a financial advisor, Seraphina has become completely obsessed with work to the point where she is making increasingly risky business decisions. We need to find a way to transfer control to Bethany before Sarah destroys everything our family has built through her company. The financial advisor had responded with detailed suggestions on how to structure the ownership transfer to minimize tax consequences and legal challenges. What Webb did not realize was that these emails proved Mom had been planning to steal my company based on completely fabricated concerns about my business management, concerns that were contradicted by every measurable indicator of company performance. But Webb's biggest mistake was revealing the existence of a document we had never seen before, a forged psychological evaluation that purported to show I was suffering from severe work-related stress disorder and impaired judgment due to perfectionist personality traits. This evaluation had been prepared by a psychologist who had never met me based entirely on information provided by Mom and Bethany. We have expert testimony that Seraphina's mental state made her unfit to manage a complex business operation, Webb explained proudly. Dr. Patricia Henley evaluated the information provided by family members and concluded that immediate intervention was necessary to protect both Seraphina and the company from her deteriorating psychological condition. Miranda and I exchanged glances as we realized that Webb had just handed us evidence of fraud conspiracy and potentially illegal practice of psychology. Henley had prepared a psychological evaluation of someone she had never examined based on information from people with clear financial motives to misrepresent my mental state. After the meeting, Miranda immediately began investigating Dr. Henley and discovered that she had been under investigation by the State Psychology Board for previous instances of preparing evaluations without proper patient contact. She had been censured twice for ethics violations and was currently facing potential license suspension. Seraphina, this is exactly the kind of evidence that transforms a family dispute into a clear-cut criminal case, Miranda explained. Webb has essentially confessed that his client and your family created fraudulent documentation to justify stealing your business. They not only stole your company, they tried to destroy your reputation and mental health credibility in the process. But the most powerful ally in building our case turned out to be someone I had never met. Jessica Rivera, a forensic accountant who specialized in corporate fraud investigations. Agent Santos had recommended Jessica after reviewing the complexity of Bethany's financial crimes. Jessica's analysis revealed the true scope of my sister's theft, which was far more extensive than we had initially calculated. Using sophisticated forensic accounting techniques, Jessica traced money movements that showed Bethany had been stealing from company accounts for nearly 2 years, not just the 8 months we had previously identified. The pattern shows escalating theft over 23 months, Jessica explained during her presentation to our legal team. It started with small personal expenses charged to business accounts, maybe $500 a month. But by the final months, she was transferring large amounts directly from business accounts to personal investments and luxury purchases. Jessica's final calculation showed that Bethany had stolen over $460,000 from Moonstone Analytics. She had been funding an elaborate lifestyle that included a down payment on a luxury condo, expensive vacations, designer clothing, and even investment in a pyramid scheme wellness company that had collapsed 6 months earlier. But here is the most significant finding, Jessica continued. The money trail shows coordination with your mother's personal accounts. There are multiple transfers between Bethany's personal accounts and accounts controlled by your mother, suggesting a coordinated money laundering operation designed to hide the stolen funds. Jessica's investigation also revealed that Mom had been using stolen company money to pay for Dad's medical treatments while simultaneously accepting my monthly financial support. She had been double-dipping, taking money I sent for Dad's care while also using money Bethany had stolen from my company for the same expenses. The forensic analysis provided the final pieces of evidence needed to pursue federal charges not just against Bethany, but potentially against Mom as well. Money laundering conspiracy to commit fraud and wire fraud across state lines were all federal crimes that carried substantial prison sentences. Agent Santos reviewed Jessica's findings and made the decision to expand the investigation formally. We now have evidence of an ongoing criminal enterprise involving multiple family members, sophisticated fraud schemes, and interstate money laundering. This has become a major federal case. With Jessica's forensic evidence, Webb's inadvertent confessions, and the expanded federal investigation, the case against my family had become unassailable. They had not simply stolen my business. They had created an elaborate criminal conspiracy that involved fraud, money laundering, and psychological manipulation. The irony was that their efforts to defend Bethany had actually provided us with the evidence needed to pursue far more serious charges than we had originally contemplated. Their own lawyer had essentially prosecuted their case for us. 3 months after I walked away from that dining room table, my family's carefully constructed house of lies finally collapsed completely. The timing was almost poetic. They came crawling back on the exact day that federal marshals executed search warrants on both Mom's house and Bethany's condo. The phone call came at 7 in the morning. Mom's voice was barely recognizable, cracked and desperate in a way I had never heard before. "Seraphina, please, you have to help us. They are taking everything. Your father? He does not understand what is happening. Please, we are still family." By 8:30, Mom and Bethany were sitting in my living room at Phoenix Insight's headquarters, where I had moved into a beautiful penthouse apartment. They looked like refugees from their former lives. Mom's perfectly styled hair was disheveled, her designer clothes wrinkled, and her trademark composure completely shattered. Bethany appeared to have aged 5 years. In 3 months, her face gaunt and her hands shaking as she clutched a tissue box. The FBI froze all our accounts. Mom explained through tears that I suspected were more about consequences than genuine remorse. They seized Dad's medical savings. The house is under federal lien, and Bethany's lawyer says she could face 15 years in federal prison. Bethany could barely speak. When she finally managed words, they came out as choking sobs. "Sarah, I know I messed up, but I never thought it would go this far. I thought you would forgive family. I thought blood was supposed to be thicker than business." The federal investigation had unraveled their entire financial life with surgical precision. Jessica Rivera's forensic accounting had traced every stolen dollar through multiple accounts and investments. Agent Santos had built an airtight case that included wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, and tax evasion charges. Harrison Webb, the high-powered attorney they had trusted to protect them, was now facing his own ethics investigation and had withdrawn from Bethany's case. But the most devastating blow was Dr. Patricia Henley's cooperation with federal investigators. Facing potential criminal charges for her role in creating fraudulent psychological evaluations, Dr. Henley had provided detailed testimony about how Mom and Bethany had pressured her to produce damaging assessments of my mental state without ever meeting me. Dr. Henley told investigators that your mother explicitly asked her to write an evaluation that would support a legal claim that you were unfit to run your own business. Agent Santos had explained to me the previous week. She has phone recordings of your mother coaching her on what psychological terminology to use to make you appear unstable and dangerous to company operations. As I looked at my family members sitting in my living room, I felt an unexpected emotion. Not anger or satisfaction, but a profound sadness for the people they had chosen to become. They had transformed themselves from my family into criminals, and they had done it so gradually that they apparently never recognized the line they were crossing. "What do you want from me?" I asked quietly. Mom's response revealed the depth of their delusion. "We want you to tell the FBI that this was all a misunderstanding, that you never intended for criminal charges to be filed, that you just wanted the business back and you are satisfied now that you have Phoenix Insights." They still believed that family loyalty should override justice, that blood relationships should provide immunity from consequences, and that I should sacrifice my integrity to preserve their comfort. They had learned nothing from 3 months of federal investigation and mounting evidence of their crimes. "We can pay back the money," Bethany added desperately. "Well, most of it. We still have some assets that have not been frozen. We can make this right if you just ask them to drop the charges." I looked at these two women who had shaped my understanding of family love and loyalty for 32 years. The people who had taught me that family always comes first, that blood is thicker than water, that we protect each other no matter what. Now they were asking me to become complicit in covering up their crimes because those same family bonds should protect them from justice. "Mom, Bethany, I need you to understand something very clearly," I said, keeping my voice steady and calm. "I did not create this situation. I did not choose to involve federal law enforcement. I did not decide to pursue criminal charges out of revenge or spite." I stood up and walked to the window overlooking the city where I had rebuilt my life and my business. "You made choices. You chose to steal money from my company for almost 2 years. You chose to plan the theft of my entire business. You chose to create fake psychological evaluations to destroy my reputation. You chose to conspiracy and money laundering and fraud." "But Sarah," Mom interrupted, "we are still family. Family forgives. Family protects each other." I turned back to face them, and for the first time in this entire ordeal, I felt complete clarity about who I was and what I valued. "You are right that family protects each other. But you stopped being my family the moment you decided that stealing my life's work was acceptable because we share DNA." The real family I had built over the past 3 months was sitting in offices throughout the building. Miranda Torres, who had fought for justice without compromise. Jessica Rivera, who had uncovered truth with scientific precision. Agent Santos, who had pursued accountability regardless of personal relationships. And the 47 employees of Phoenix Insights, who had chosen integrity over convenience. These people had supported me, believed in me, and stood by me during the most difficult period of my life. They had earned their place in my life through their actions, not through accidents of birth or marriage. I will not ask federal investigators to drop charges against people who committed federal crimes, I continued. I will not pretend that theft and fraud are family disputes. I will not sacrifice justice to preserve relationships with people who proved they never valued me as anything more than a source of money and success they could steal when it suited them. Mom and Bethany left that day understanding that there would be no family reconciliation, no last-minute reprieve, and no escape from the consequences of their choices. 6 weeks later, Bethany pled guilty to multiple federal charges and was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. Mom received 3 years for her role in the conspiracy, though her sentence was reduced due to her cooperation in recovering stolen assets. Phoenix Insights has grown into a $12 million company with offices in 3 cities. We employ over 120 people who understand that success comes from merit, honesty, and hard work, rather than manipulation and theft. I have built a chosen family of colleagues, friends, and allies who share my values and support my growth. The most important lesson I learned is that loyalty cannot be demanded or inherited. It must be earned through consistent actions over time. Blood relationships that are not supported by respect, honesty, and genuine care are nothing more than shared genetics. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and your own integrity? What would you do if the people you trusted most betrayed that trust for money? I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is hold people accountable for their actions, even when those people are family. Share your thoughts in the comments below. I would love to hear about your experiences with family boundaries and justice. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about standing up for yourself and finding strength through adversity. Share this with someone who needs to hear that they deserve better than conditional love based on what they can provide to others. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, you are not required to set yourself on fire to keep others warm, even when those others are family. Sometimes justice and healing require the courage to say no to people you love. Stay strong. Trust your instincts and never apologize for protecting your peace and your principles.